DCs obviously have to be related to infrastructure. So it's okay if we can show a link, say, let's say transport and three waters planning when there's been modelling going on and there's an absolute link to growth that you are comfortable that it's only growth related, and then you can put it into a development contribution. Because the issue with that is that those particular costs might be 100 grand here, 200 grand there. They're kind of small compared to things like hazards.
Yeah.
Where the hazards assessments, I think Southern Corridor was over $1 million worth of hazard assessment. The hazard assessments, because they're much broader in terms of the benefits and the beneficiaries from growth, and they're actually not purely infrastructure related in terms of the LGA and how that's set out, can't recover those through DCs. I talked to one of the finance managers in Auckland, and he did suggest that we have a look at targeted rates and the use of IFFA. It seemed to be that targeted rates might be the easiest way to recover it, but if you do have an IFFA set up and you've got your special purpose vehicle, then you could potentially wrap it into that. So there are options, it's just got to be careful.
The other thing we're looking at is, because it's an enduring sort of document, and whether it can be capitalised and therefore spread over multiple years as well. So
Just get funded. I mean, is there an element of just normal building and resource consenting that the process can be a small portion of that allocated towards more holistic planning structures? Given that the value of this is for Wānaka, when you're doing that level of depth detail things spread across the actual consenting. So I'm just right there.
It's tricky because there is a broader benefit for planning, obviously, but there's clearly these that have been unlocked ultimately for development. So it's
With a targeted rate.
tricky. Yeah.
I think it's, if we could just kind of keep moving, I think it highlights the need for that conversation. I mean, and it's good to hear that they are happening. So that's providing some reassurance.
Big impact on OPEX, so I think if we can capitalise, because we could do more and do it better, get more evidence.
We've just moved from OPEX to CapEx, and we were saying the other week, but beyond that, I'm not sure too sure. That's a kind of conversation.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. That's a future thing.
So yeah, the image I've got on slide 7 is really, I've sort of talked about this without showing you the map, but the extents of the two areas. So the orange area is the project development area, which is Wānaka town centre to 3 parks, and then goes all the way down to 80 Point. And then the future development area, Wānaka South, is the dark green area. And then we've got a few arrows. Probably can't see it properly, but there is a dashed orange line which is showing the kind of the extents of the area of influence. So
that's quite a disturbing area of influence on the west side of Lake Wānaka. It's a very large area.
Yeah.
When you look at the east side, and there's virtually no area, there's no area of influence at all. I'd just like to query that. So you've got the area of influence goes right the way up to Waterfall Creek, which is a huge part of boundary of outstanding natural landscape. But on the east side, you've got no area of influence at all.
Why do we need to justify? We need to be able to justify the area.
I'd be very concerned about the area of influence to the north on terms of the landscape values.
Well, and I mean, I've raised this problem as well because we don't want to signal that these areas are open to development. But I mean, the fact that, and yeah, I mean, originally we'd sort of, we softened them so it didn't look as obvious, and the direction of influence was more important than because that allowed you to determine the right boundaries. And I mean, I think one of the things, if you look at that area up around Ribbon and Finchbarn Farm and all that, and Waterfall Creek, you know, we've got landscape boundaries, we've got natural hazards, we've got all those things that will determine the correct limit of the urban area, so to speak.
yeah,
So yeah, I mean, I suppose that
The cost.
and that western side is gone that far because the hazards. To understand them.
Okay, that's
But it's the right to allow into this process.
well,
Yeah, because it does have an impact.
and I mean, your main thing was you were wanting to make sure that natural hazards assessment encompassed Waterfall Creek in that case, weren't you? So it was, that was the reason why. But it doesn't automatically mean that that area is
Structure.
open for further development. It could be mean that it's a protected area, or it could mean that it's no one else or whatever. And there are no one else in that area. There are,
Yeah.
and there are, you know, even the boundary to the south, you know, up against the Hopgood lands and stuff is subject to an ONL boundary as well. The same with the Cardrona River is that, you know, with Riverbank Road's a funny one because we're not necessarily, there is already development on the other side of Riverbank Road, but there's also understanding what the natural hazards associated with the flooding of the Cardrona River is, and actually where, you know, what the opportunity is there as much as where the right boundary is. So, I mean, I had the same conversation. I suppose this is the opportunity to actually assess and determine those things to some degree.
Some of the conversation pieces that came out of the ecological workshop was if we the whole mountains to lake, mountain to river, this provided us an opportunity to get connections through down to the river, because there aren't any there now. So it's not necessarily putting arrows in spaces where we think to bring in greater development, but it's understanding whether the structure plan is great.
Since when I was querying them, because you've got the arrows saying that will influence in that direction, but you've got the area of influence is still on the same line as the actual development area.
That's what's.
So should that area of influence be further out on that side?
Or the opposite, because
And there's a risk, like I said, there's a risk in that. So we had this conversation because I've went down this rabbit hole. And originally the area in the middle was mapped with a colour. So the orange area and the blue area was mapped with a colour. And I felt that, well, it was obvious that there was infill and interaction between those things. We didn't want to preempt how far that area was mapped in terms of a colour. And so we softened it to being a boundary, which is sort of a soft boundary, and then identifying those directions of influence rather than the. So I mean, it's imperfect, I suppose, but it just gives you scope to
I think it's,
without signalling that this is a.
but scope is the problem, like, if we are by doing this, and I guess it's a legal question, that then influences the cost of this. The risk is that you put that, what does that dot mean for people? So when their structural plans go through the process, and we've got the red area, and we've got the orange area, and then we've got the green area, but then we've got this area with the dotted. What does that mean for developers within that area and what they can submit on, and what? How does that
submit on this, because it will be a public process? So when we did Ladies Mail, Frampton was identified as an area of influence because it was the main employment area. We didn't touch Frampton, it was just identified. We looked at it in terms of view shafts that went all the way down to Water Peak and Cecil Peak. We looked at the roading network. We looked at the fact that it was an employment area. That has an impact on the development and how we're thinking about Ladies Mail in terms of its closeness and its interactions with other areas. But it didn't mean that we were developing it or even proposing it.
So there's no scope. My question is, I guess, so that means there is no scope for anyone developing in those areas to say we are influenced, therefore we would like these changes to the district plan within that area. That is not the orange area, not the green area, the dotted line area.
It's not like a plain change.
So they can't, there is no scope, legal scope for them to.
We determine what we implement out of the
That's all I'm worried
consultation.
about, because
And
that then changes the integrated, that's great, but we wouldn't want it creeping into the sides and district plan changes, because then where does this stop?
There's no doubt that you'll get submissions seeking an extension to the scope of the thing. I mean, there's almost no doubt that. I mean, what we're trying to do is avoid signalling that they, by being in the process, they've got a right to develop it.
But that's what I worry, that having an area of
I agree.
influence does, is it?
There a sort of clear way forward? I mean, we've done Ladies Mail and Southern Corridor. Has this popped up before as an issue? Or has it not been in there?
No, not to this extent.
And then I don't think it's worth, I think we need to sort of keep moving forward.
We probably do, it would be nice to get some sort of legal opinion as to whether including an area of influence sandwiched between these two areas, does it increase the ability for those within that area of influence to legitimately have their requests for increased development or plan change provisions to
I think
maintain
it's
this held
how
up?
always get that. I mean, Ladies Mount, another good example of how the Hutchinson land came in. It wasn't something that we dismissed it as part of the structure plan process, but that didn't mean anything when it went through to the RMA.
But are we increasing the ability for their lawyers to argue that it should be in scope? That's the question, and I don't need to talk about it anymore, but I just think it's.
Okay, I do want to,
Yeah,
if
and
you
I-
don't mind, I would like to
yeah.
just keep moving on,
Yeah.
because you can keep, you will be keeping to talk about this in other circles. I mean, I guess the question I would ask is, well, what's the purpose of the map? Because you show, the minute you show a map to anyone, particularly a room like this, these are the kind of questions you come up with. So I think, you're hearing some specific points that are, for you to take away and think about in that legal.
Listen, I mean, I interrogated this pretty hard with you. This, we
I
talked
was
about
in
it.
the smart
so,
group.
Yeah.
Yeah, remember that, so I'm gonna keep
And
it.
subsequently, we've been engaging on it. So.
Yeah, and one of the things we have done on that particular map is, I'd write this tiny. So the area of influence, the wider area likely to be affected by the structure plan. Some technical assessments will be undertaken using this area to understand constraints and improve future infrastructure and transport connections. Outstanding natural landscapes are excluded and are considered a hard boundary. So without writing too much information, we're trying to provide enough that demonstrates why it's included, not because we don't develop it.
Well, I think a map like this is always going to be in the context of other materials. It's so.
Just like when I went back, there was one other thing. So the orange area that defines slightly differently in the spatial plan is the orange area was like this other corridor. It was a bubble. It was a soft boundary. It was never a defined boundary. But the blue area was what would we call future development area or something, future urban area or something, which did have a hard boundary in the spatial plan. So there's actually two different things going on. So the orange area was never intended to be a really fixed hard boundary.
And I've already had a question from one of the people down in the south going, why does the boundary intersect my property? Why is it at the edge or just pulled it either side? So that has.
It's going to be an iterative conversation as this progresses, there's no doubt. We are really short of time, so I'm going to ask you to really whiz, otherwise, because we have a whole other meeting after this that we still keep it contained.
Yes, and I'm meeting a landowner from South Wānaka.
Maybe just, start to get our focus on the engagement process.
Yeah.
I'm going to invite 2 slides ahead, maybe.
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's just.
Cool, so what we could go to slide 10 maybe. If you'd like.
Describe it, because there aren't actual numbers on, here we go. I see it is at the top, yeah.
So just telling you things you already know, but engagement sits on the spectrum. Significance engagement policy does lay this out. They're basically from inform to empower. Recently, there's been developments in using deliberative or participatory approaches, mainly to address kind of trust in institutions in general, and also just get better policy outcomes as well. So it's been used a lot over the world, and I guess that the point of putting it next to the spectrum is to show that it's gradually trying to move the public involvement and decision making from the informed end closer to the involved collaboration end. And that's kind of a big part of the purpose of doing these deliberative processes. Obviously, if you want to increase the amount of sway that the public has, you need to increase the amount of information that they're having in order to make these decisions. So I guess that's setting the scene a little bit. I won't probably spend too much time on it because you probably all know a lot about it already. So I could just give some, maybe on slide 12, just these are the main kind of key features of running a deliberative process. There's lots of different ways that you could maybe do it. I know that citizens' assemblies are the classic example, so we can use that as an example to explain it, but just letting you know the other iterations. But the common thread amongst all of them are basically representativeness. So it's a random selection of people that is representative of the community as a whole. So usually census data to look at things like age, gender, ethnicity, ownership, and then location is obviously a good one for spatial issues, things like that. And they can maybe depend on the issue, but those are the main kind of core demographic splits that you'd use. And then there's diversity of information and expertise. So these People are usually going through lots of workshops or sessions where they would come every second Saturday, essentially, or third Saturday, depending on availability, be compensated for their time to come and be presented with usually an information booklet, which is the basis of information, and then a variety of contesting opinions about something. So a big part of this is also allowing participants themselves to ask questions and then say, oh, well, we want to speak to someone so-and-so expertise about this thing. It's having a back and forth conversation over a longer period of time, as opposed to maybe a shorter period where you can't really get the time to explore these complicated issues. And then that's the third one is time to understand the issue, which is basically self-explanatory. The fourth one is kind of an open and free response. So a big part of running these processes is to have backing from the beginning, usually from the commissioning body, which would be elected members, to say, we will take your recommendations seriously. We're not just going to put them into a little pile, which will then gather dust. There will be more of it. We will respond to each of these recommendations and give a good reason why we did or didn't take them on board. It's not to say that you are fully empowered to take on every single recommendation all the time, but it's more just having a transparency of process, and people usually back the process more if they know that it'll be going, like the mayor or the elected members will open it, and then they'd be like, we're listening to what you guys say, and then at the end they'd be sending them a document that they write themselves, have full control over, and that would be an open response. And then usually within 30 to 60 days, the commissioning body would have to do an open response to those recommendations and say, well, we've chosen to take these ones, and the ones that they haven't, it's like, oh, because of this and this and this, just to kind of add some transparency to the whole process.
Would you be able to do something like, because normally we go out to the community, do some pre-consultation and get some feedback, would we be able to do that process and then give this group that feedback to help? Do you see, like, how do we?
Yeah, this is the intention here, and I think they'll talk about this, is to sit along, is sitting within kind of a suite of approaches. So it's not the only thing that.
No, because I'm sort of imagining them doing our job for us is listening to and getting more information, and then we get the output of that.
No, exactly. We'll
cool.
cover that later. Yeah, I think I'll answer
Sorry,
the questions there.
It's just because we're going through a similar process they're proposing for the Charlotte or the Kawerau long-term, discharge, and we don't have the time to do this, and so I can imagine the way we're approaching the same thing is very differently. This has given me confidence. I'm a bit concerned about the other.
The other one, is probably going to be around the appetite to pay, and it'll probably be more around a poll. It's just an assembly, so it'll sort of more referendum. It's still participatory, and I guess it's still a relevant question given the technicalities. But
So I guess that's even that works. So just to highlight the fact that participatory is actually more on the traditional end of what has been done, and is there are certain things in that camp, and then deliberative. So you can consider that participatory, but this that is deliberation is deliberative because that's the iterative learning, information digestion piece. So they are, and if you look at that IPP, the scale of public participation, they're kind of different.
Yeah,
They do different things.
Yeah, it'd probably be better to discuss that.
Later,
Yeah,
sure.
because I don't want to preempt any of those conversations, but there is, I can maybe color that with, I think 13, pretty much everyone in terms of these are best suited to value-based problems, which are complicated, long-term issues that's go along cycles, usually controversial, which is where you need people with a heavier understanding about an issue and more to weigh in. It's not as an easy answer as a yes or no. It's usually grey, which is the types of problems that you guys are used to dealing with. So it's kind of usually quite refreshing when members of the public can get through these and then realise that it's not as simple as it sounds. Most of the time.
A lot of work on us, like to have someone else do a really in-depth deliberation, because they can probably do more than we do.
Yeah.
It assists with decision making. That's the
Yes,
intent.
yeah.
Is that it is not the decision making.
No,
It assists with the decision making.
I think hopefully this is a relevant question to this topic because I think got a good grasp of what it is, but it's also trying to contextualize the planning process versus another form which is quite multifaceted and design multi-criteria analysis for it. The one, what questions do you ask? What are the things that are planning thing, and what are the things that we really need reference? The other thing is that the other community engagement that's been done is out of Wānaka plan, highway master plan, and sits on the side and collects dust. So there's an element of I'm all about bringing the community into the planning process. But like how are we acknowledging and celebrating all forms of engagement, and how do we reflect it back in the same respect? And then also once it's all done, everyone gets their hopes up, you know, spend a lot of time, money on the process, then all of a sudden there's no money to deliver it, or the developer comes in and legally changes it to something else. So these are all the things that's floating around in the back of my mind in the context of this process of, you know, having the statutory weight to actually enforce this to ensure that it doesn't undermine future citizens' assemblies. And then also, yeah, like the investment that we put into it, getting the most out of it and sending a message.
What no to interrupt.
It's a lot,
That's a good
sorry.
I don't think there's an easy answer to that.
Yeah.
We have statutory processes, we have a spatial plan, we have a planning bill coming through, regional spatial plans, requirements that we plan ahead for growth, long-term, you know, infrastructure strategies. We have to do all of them. And then the same national policy statement goes, you must also enable, you know, unplanned growth. And then there is fast tracks that are enabled by the government who are also saying, do what you do, spend the money, but we're going to do this as well. And I think we'll always have that tension. The only thing I could say really around the whole structure planning to plan change is that it was a lot of work, but I felt that moving from the structure plan and going straight into a streamlined planning process for Tiputahi was a really good thing because it embedded it really quickly, although we've now seen fast tracks which are gonna shoot for the stars. But at least we have got something where we're having lots of conversations where we're going, this is the structure plan, this is what we were trying to do, this is what we spend, this is all the engagement, this is what we're following, and we have that, and it's all embedded in the PDP, which is all.
Yeah, and I think from first principles, having an evidence-based fits if it's being challenged about what the
I
allocation
always
is.
feel that's our overarching problem,
Yeah.
especially with fast tracks in transport. We've got a model coming, but it's 12 months away. That transport model will be so helpful in enabling us to make quick, informed decisions and being able to, you know, look at things and actually go. The problem is if you put 1,000 out here, that intersection stops. What we have at the minute is somebody's fast track transport piece of work that says, oh, there's no problems here, everything will just be normal, and we've got 10 days to respond. We have nothing to do other than say that that's not true, but we can't counter that problem.
Yeah.
So this is another opportunity problem, you know, same in disguise. That I'm finding is that in one of my comments around the Southern Corridor is that it was a very dense plan and, you know, a lot of sophistication and, you know, thought throughout the whole thing. But from an outside perspective, it's really hard to interpret necessarily how that manifests. What we're struggling with is developers are coming in and going, this is what I want to do. And then like 300 to 500 page plan. And then it's like, oh, well, I don't know, this is what I want to do. So I think it's also getting the best leverage of actually making it really easy to understand. And presenting it in a way that gets buy-in also, given that we're not necessarily responsible for delivering it.
We throw around crazy numbers now too. I mean, you know, the Ladies Mile or Southern Corridor, you're throwing around numbers of, you know, 4,000, 5,000 houses at a time, and the same, we've got that same at Hawea. I mean, I just don't think people comprehend the scale. There's nothing, we've never done anything of this scale. We're talking about half a dozen of them at the same time, you know. We've never done anything with any remotely near that scale.
It'd be good to focus on the citizens assembly part of it,
Yeah,
because
so
like I did before you go off on the.
Yeah, so what I would like to do, I want to signal that it's 11:40 and we go into 5 minutes, 10 minutes, we need to be actually kind of really wrapped up and walking out the door.
Yeah.
Because some of us are going to another meeting. Can I ask you to focus on the, I
We've
think,
got to stop talking.
yeah, two things, sorry, and then you're suffering from
Oh.
honesty, so apologies. But I wonder if we focus on just, so I think that the page that talks about the different tools, you go away and read, because it is a really useful landscape. Yep, and I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, it's like 14, yeah.
Yeah, the Citizens Assembly, what it actually is, you know, maybe we talk about that. And then this one, which is the phases.
Phases would be good.
So
Yeah.
you want to go to the phases next?
Yeah,
And then maybe circle back and do the
I
citizens.
might do the assembly and then the phase.
Okay, fine.
It's okay.
Go.
Sure. So the Citizens Assembly on slide 15, which kind of lays out what we've decided. Obviously, this is early stages, so we're still wanting to shore up the shape of this design, and this will be done throughout reiterations with the Smart Growth Committee, and then we also get experts in the field to advise as well, because obviously it's something we want to do well. But in general, Citizens Assembly, about 20 to 40 people for the Wānaka area was identified as a preferred approach. So I guess the time, reflectivity of opinion, I guess obviously the spatial element of this would be important to think about in terms of the selection process as well. And I guess the thing that makes us more suitable is also because we have the time and funding to do it well. So it's a good kind of case study to do this. I know that there's a statutory question about it, but we'll never escape that.
The easiest political way is that spending money on our people rather than on other consultants. So there's a way to frame it that helps.
And yeah, exactly. So we don't really have to talk about that next slide that much. It's pretty self-explanatory. But then for the phases, I guess, and this maybe answers Nikki's question from the beginning, it does work well with wider engagement at the beginning. So this is a way to kind of identify key trade-offs and kind of maybe stakeholders as well that will have a particular interest in this, have particular viewpoints, because I guess the whole point is to daylight a lot of this to the Assembly members and combine it with the technical information as well, which is why it's happening later as opposed to at the beginning, because we need to be doing these ecological assessments, these transport assessments, because these are the questions that Assembly members like yourself will be asking, and we need to have the answer to those. So that's why it's good to have all the technical work done, and then at the other side you'd have the wider engagement done. So we could use maybe a variety of some digital tools. I know that we've been exploring some ways to get everyday people involved in this, but then obviously there will be some stakeholders that will be particularly interested. Liz has already kicked off some of that as well. And I guess the whole idea is to just identify where the pressure points, where the tensions are, where the key trade-offs are, and then that'll be the discussion that goes into the Citizens Assembly to really kind of nail up those harder problems, because that's what they're best used for. You know, like people are pretty good at identifying issues. It's the solutions to those issues, which is the harder part. So the Assembly is like, they're really taking in this identification of trade-offs. It's the wrestling with them and finding out that there's no easy solution.
Yeah.
And it's actually a lot harder than I thought it would be, which is the whole purpose of this.
So cool. I can see it's
I
a
think
really
I've said that.
future
last
council.
week.
You know, people get involved and they love the process. They may stick their hand up
Yeah.
next time round.
Exactly. So, and there's lots of different models that we can explore to use them. I think we're still in an early stage in kind of figuring out, because there's lots of interesting ways that we can combine this with influence as well, or kind of having as many people as possible get along the journey. So I know there was talks about using information in a way that's easy for people to understand, but having an assembly kind of forces the creation of a lot of this collateral, because you basically have to create, 50 to 100 page booklet summarizing all of this complex information for an average day person to understand. And then they become really good sounding boards, and then can be used to create further collateral that educates the wider population as well, which is kind of like a good mechanism. That's a feedback loop. I guess there's this whole question about when we get to the draft scenario stages, then we can go up for a wider engagement and then come back in again. So I guess you would imagine like it's wide and then it's narrow with the Assembly, and then wide again with the draft plan.
Yeah.
And then there's the final approval by the Smart Growth Committee to make a recommendation for full council to adopt the plan. So
And to
this is the
also-
phases,
And the wide bit at the very beginning also takes into account the work that's been done before. So that's like Wānaka 20, I've given them a whole lot of stuff already. Wānaka 2020, like 3 questions, research, a whole lot of stuff that's gone before, or that's around the visioning for the Upper Clutha.
And that's how we'll focus it when we do
Yeah.
phase 1, is looking at what that said. We'll try and theme it, and what we'll try and do is go out and instead of start from scratch, bigger aspirations for Wānaka for the next 100 years, is this is what we've heard before. This is some of the work that has been done. Does this resonate with you? Has it picked everything up? Is there anything missing? And sort of allow it to build on that. So, because, we don't want to repeat things from the beginning either.
I would anticipate for Wānaka that the group might want more information around water. It's such a big thing over here. So if we're needing to do expert evidence stuff up front, let's not limit it to hazards. Let's actually look at impacts on our water, not just stormwater, but aquifers, the whole. But maybe talk to stakeholders, talk to why about what they would expect.
They really are all over it. I cannot say sorry positive things about how comprehensive the work's been to date. And I think the team is really getting their heads around how we think over here and what has gone before, because we know how highly engaged our people are. So I think this is going to be a fantastic way to address it. Can I just ask for any final questions or thoughts, because we do really need to wrap up, I'm sorry.
Yeah, fine thought for me. I think it's a great frame of reference to look at it as the novelty that it is to go. This can inform a lot of other more holistic, planning is such a complicated, messy thing that only a few land lawyers get to really understand. So how do we then translate these complicated aspects to the community? Having that question behind it really helps me go, yeah, this is a great investment. Because we'll learn so much. And we had Margaret Pub not being able to interpret the zoning rules around it because of how complicated it is. So there's so many other ancillary pieces of work that could come from it. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And in general, I just think, it is great to battle test and get an understanding of how you're thinking, because it is full trust to you and great credit. But yeah, it is up to see move forward together. Yeah, thanks.
One quick thing from me, just people will drop off, won't they? So maybe start with more rather than less people, anticipating that some will slide off, and how do we manage when they do slide off? There must be a process.
There is a process to
Yeah,
that.
there's usually about a 10% attrition rate, but if they're paid at the end, the year gets less. And then also there's certain demographics that are more likely to drop off than others. So with water care, you've noticed that until you over-select for certain demographics.
The really good thing is, so Campbell has actually run citizens assembly before, so yay, and they're in touch with experts around the country.
Maybe just the final thing about the random selection and facilitation, it's important for that to be independent kind of council staff as well, because that builds trust. So I know that there's this idea of also don't have consultants involved, but having external experts for the random selection and facilitation elements does build trust.
Yeah, definitely.
So just letting you know that I'll probably do.
Yeah.
My only one comment. Oh, it's great. Love it. Could you just keep us up to date with we're getting the random people, we're doing.
Oh, yeah,
so that we
I was
know.
gonna say, it's
So-
probably gonna come to smart growth committee, so I feel
Yeah,
like
but I don't really.
either come to the meeting or talk to me.
It can be a chair thing.
There's a
one of those
lot
chair
on,
things
but
we
I
do.
just want to keep so I'm aware and can tell,
you'll keep
so I
us
like to keep people informed that we're doing this, because I think people want to know,
I
right?
have been sending email updates and including both Simon and Quentin every time we're really early days at the minute.
Yeah,
We're
yeah,
just
yeah,
working
yeah,
on
just
moving
moving forward.
things into place.
Yeah.
So I've been sending short notes, as I've done, like the other week, we sent out 155 letters to landowners just in Wānaka South. So I did make sure certain people were updated in case that caused any kind of concerns.
Yeah.
So we did talk to Simon initially around whether we should do two sets of reporting, one for smart growth and one to Upper Clutha, but I suppose the problem we were trying to manage was not quite over reporting, but spending all of our time trying to report when we've moved on maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and then it can get quite complicated.
Yeah, I think because what we said is to have the exact same report, you could go to both places, and
Yeah, and I think that was John from governance did say that you guys would be invited to attend those smart broker meetings when we're taking something, so you could, jump online or attend in person. Just tell me.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. It's like, do you want an email? Do you want me to tell you? Do you want to share?
Someone just tell me.
you want this, don't you? You want me, to go like,
I
hello, hold your hand,
Yeah,
okay.
a little bit.
All right, I'm gonna wrap this up and say thank you very much. Have you gotten what you need?
Just reassurance. Thanks, yeah.
Fully engaged group over here, clearly representative of our community, and you are, so go forth, and we can't wait to hear what comes next.
Cool, yeah.
So, thank you. Should we turn the recording off? And then while we're just sitting here, then all of us, we're clearly not gonna get to have our full chat about comms, engagement, share with us, etc. So I might look to attach that to, figure out another